All right, so get ready because we are going deep into this crazy Hollywood lawsuit about the movie they're making of It Ends With Us by Colleen Hoover.
Mm.
The main source you sent over is like a video commentary from Candace Owens, right?
Yeah, that's right. And as you know, Owens is like known for, strong opinions. So we're gonna like try to sort through all that.
For sure. We're not trying to pick a side here, just trying to help make sense of all the accusations and counterclaims and all the drama behind the scenes of this movie with, Blake Lively and directed by Justin Baldoni.
It's like we're putting together a puzzle, with all these different pieces of information and try to see the bigger picture.
Totally. So, like, right off the bat, Owens basically says Ryan Reynolds, Lively's husband, is like a huge H part of all this drama.
Yeah. And the way she puts it, she makes it sound like Reynolds is almost like psychotic, right? She says that like he needs to control everything, especially when it comes to Lively.
And she uses specific examples, right? Like, there are these text messages where it seems like Reynolds is asking Baldoni to change the whole shooting schedule.
Yeah, and Owen's take is that like Reynolds was having a hard time being away from Lively for so long while they're filming. She even connects that to like Reynolds' public image and all those Deadpool jokes.
And this is where it gets really interesting to me. She talks about this scene in Deadpool and Wolverine where Reynolds, like, jokes about his dog finding a new papa while he's gone.
And then she connects that to similar jokes Reynolds made when they were promoting It Ends With Us, which honestly seems a little weird given that the movie's about domestic violence.
Yeah, it's kind of like she's saying there's this weird contrast between, you know, Reynolds' funny guy image
Yeah.
and what might actually be going on behind the scenes.
Right, like is he hiding something? Owens even says that maybe Reynolds got some of these like control issues from his dad and that he might be, kind of a yeller.
Whoa, okay. And then she brings up stuff about Reynolds and like Hugh Jackman and Scarlett Johansson, who's like his ex-wife, right?
Yeah, she's trying to show a pattern here. So she says that Reynolds is holding this grudge against Jackman because of something Jackman said about Johansson. And then she reminds everyone that Johansson, who's, smart and classy, left Reynolds after like only 2 years of marriage.
So she's implying that maybe there's some similarities to what's happening now with Lively.
Right, she's creating a whole story here.
Okay, so let's move on to Blake Lively. Owens goes all in, portraying her as this like bratty princess, totally obsessed with how she looks, more than like actually being a good actress.
Yeah, and Owens uses some like specific things to back that up. First, she says the movie went way over budget on wardrobe because Lively needed to control every single outfit. And guess what? People ended up hating the outfits.
Oh, wow. And then there's this whole thing about Lively demanding that they bring all the clothes to her penthouse for fittings instead of her going to set like everyone else.
Yeah, Owens makes a big deal about how strange and like demanding that is.
It definitely doesn't make Lively look good. But this whole thing is way bigger than just like clashing personalities.
Yeah.
We're talking a full-on PR war. Owens gives all these details about the people involved.
So she introduces us to Stephanie Jones from Jones Work. She represents Baldoni in his studio, Wayfarer Studios. And then there's Leslie Sloan from Vision PR, who works with Lively and Reynolds. And right away, there's drama because Jennifer Eel leaves Jones Work.
Right, and then Baldoni hires Melissa Nathan for, like, crisis PR, which Owens says made Stephanie Jones feel, like, betrayed.
It gets even crazier when Owens describes how they confronted all at Jones Work with like security guards and a lawyer and an IT guy and forced her to give him her phone because they thought she was stealing info.
Owens even compares it to leaving a cult. Like, Elle was, scared and they wanted to get info to use against Lively and Reynolds.
And she even implies that this is how they got those text messages that were leaked and maybe changed by the New York Times to make Baldoni look bad. It's a bold accusation, for sure. And she backs it up by pointing out how Jones is connected to WME because of her husband, Jason Hodis, who's a big deal there with clients like Tom Brady.
So she's saying that maybe there's, like, all this power stuff and conflicts of interest going on.
Exactly. Owens is making it seem like everyone's personal relationships and career goals are all tangled up, which makes everything super messy.
And then she drops this bombshell. Apparently, someone told Baldoni and his people to record all their conversations from the very beginning because they thought Lively and Reynolds might be shady and try to trick them.
And Owens points out that in New Jersey, you only need one person to know they're being recorded for it to be legal. So they could have been recording without anyone else knowing.
Which means they could have tapes of conversations with, like Sony execs and WME people, which could be a huge problem if those conversations contradict what people have been saying publicly.
That raises the stakes big time.
Yeah.
It makes it seem like everyone is looking out for themselves and trying to control how the story is told. It's like they're all playing chess, trying to plan out their moves and what will happen next.
Okay, so what about the New York Times? Owens really goes after them, saying that they're basically working with Lively and Reynolds, like maybe even getting a biased version of the story from Stephanie Jones.
Yeah, and she uses some specific things to back that up. Like, she points to the metadata on the Times articles, claiming that it shows they were already working on the story before Lively even filed her complaint. And that goes against what the Times said, that they only got the info later.
And she also points out how the Times only responded to one of the metadata issues that people online found.
It does make you wonder why they didn't address the other stuff. It makes it seem like they were trying to avoid those other claims. Owens thinks there's a cover-up.
Okay, well, speaking of cover-ups and hidden agendas, Owens really spends a lot of time talking about Stephanie Jones. She makes her seem like the mastermind behind how the story is being told in the media. Owens even suggests that Jones might have been the one who leaked those text messages and then made sure the story was told in a way that protected her clients, Baldoni and Wayfarer Studios.
And then there's the whole thing with her husband and his job at WME, which adds, another layer of complexity to who has power and who's influencing who.
Yeah, it's all super tangled. It makes you wonder who's really calling the shots and what their reasons are.
It shows how things aren't always what they seem, especially in Hollywood, where everyone's personal stuff and career ambitions are all mixed up.
So after going down this rabbit hole with us into this It Ends With Us lawsuit, what do you think? What are the main things that stuck with you?
For me, it's a reminder to be careful about what we believe, especially when it comes from people who have something to gain from a specific outcome. It's also interesting to see how recording everything and social media are making things more transparent, but also making it easier to manipulate people.
It definitely makes you think about who has the power, not just in Hollywood, but everywhere. Seems like everyone wants to control how the story is told, and it's up to us to figure out what's really going on and make our own decisions about what to believe.
This whole "it ends with us" thing is just one example of how these things are all coming together. It's a really interesting story that makes you think about what's true, who has power, and how people try to get justice.
Owens really goes in depth on Jennifer Ale leaving Jones' work and everything that happened after. She describes this confrontation where Ale is forced to hand over her phone, like something you'd see in a movie.
The way Owens describes it, it makes you wonder if they were doing things that are wrong, going too far to protect themselves.
It also shows how personal relationships and power can really mess things up in a professional setting, especially in Hollywood.
And then Owens drops another bombshell. Apparently, someone advised Baldoni and his team to record all their conversations right from the start because they were worried that Lively and Reynolds might be sneaky and try to pull something.
It's like a real-life spy movie with everyone recording each other and trying to get ahead.
And this was totally legal in New Jersey because you only need one person to consent to being recorded. So they could have all sorts of conversations on tape without anyone else knowing.
Including conversations with Sony and WME execs. If those recordings ever come out, it could be a disaster for everyone involved if what they said doesn't match what they've been saying publicly.
This takes everything to a whole new level. It makes you wonder if everyone involved is more focused on saving their own skin than anything else.
Okay, but let's talk about the New York Times for a second. Owens really goes after them, saying they're in cahoots with Lively and Reynolds, and maybe even got a biased version of the story from Stephanie Jones.
And she brings up evidence to back this up, like the metadata from the Times articles, which she says shows they were working on the story before Lively even filed a complaint. And that totally contradicts what the Times said about when they got the information.
She also points out how they only addressed one of those metadata issues while ignoring all the others people found online.
Yeah, it makes you think, right? Why not address all of them if they have nothing to hide? Owens thinks it points to a cover-up.
Speaking of cover-ups and hidden agendas, Owens really focuses on Stephanie Jones. She makes her out to be the puppet master behind how the story is being spun in the media.
And then there's the whole connection to her husband and his powerful position at WME, which adds another layer to who's influencing who.
Right, it's like, whoa, maybe there's more going on here than we realize.
It definitely makes you wonder who's pulling the strings behind the scenes and what their real motivations are. It's all very tangled.
Okay, so after all this, after this deep dive into the It Ends With Us mess, what are your biggest takeaways?
For me, it's a big reminder to be careful about the information we see, especially when it comes from people who might have a reason to twist the truth. It's also crazy to see how this technology, recording everything and social media, is changing things. Like, on the one hand, it makes things more transparent, but on the other, it makes it easier to manipulate people.
Yeah, for sure. It makes you think about the power dynamics, not just in Hollywood, but everywhere, you know? It
Mhm.
seems like everyone's trying to control the story, and we have to figure out for ourselves what's really going on.
This "it ends with us" situation is just one example of how all these things are playing out. It's a story that really makes you think about truth, power, and how people try to get what they want.
It's like this whole situation is like a textbook example of how having like recordings of everything changes the game.
Oh, totally. Owens really makes a point of that.
Yeah.
If anyone could be recording at any time, it forces everyone to be more transparent. You never know who might have a different version of events, that they captured.
It makes you think twice about what you say or do, knowing that someone could be recording it and bring it up later.
Exactly. And it kind of brings us back to Owens going after the New York Times, right? She thinks maybe they were part of pushing a certain story that made Lively and Reynolds look good, maybe even because of Stephanie Jones.
Yeah, she talks about the dates on the Times' articles and how those dates suggest that maybe they were working on the story before Lively even went to court, which doesn't line up with what the Times said about when they got the info.
Right, and it's not just the timing that Owens questions. She also points out how the Times only addressed one of those date discrepancies, but there were a bunch more that people online found.
It does make you wonder, like, why not address all of them if they have nothing to hide? It makes Owens think there's something they're trying to cover up.
Well, speaking of cover-ups and hidden motives, Owens spends a lot of time talking about Stephanie Jones. She makes it seem like Jones was the one who was, like, controlling how the story was told in the media.
Yeah, Owens suggests that Jones might have been the one who leaked those text messages and then worked to make sure the story was told in a way that made her clients, Baldoni and Wayfair, look good.
And then there's that whole connection to her husband and his job at WME, which makes you think about who has the power here.
It's like, whoa, maybe there's way more going on here than meets the eye.
It shows you that things are not always what they seem, especially in Hollywood. Everyone's personal life and their work stuff are all mixed up.
So after this crazy deep dive into the It Ends With Us drama, what are your big takeaways?
I think the big thing for me is like remembering to be careful about what we believe, especially when it comes from people who have something to gain from the story being told a certain way. It's also crazy to see how all this technology, recording everything and social media is changing things. It's like it can make things more transparent, but it can also make it easier for people to manipulate things.
It definitely makes you think about who has the power, not just in Hollywood, but everywhere. It feels like everyone is trying to control how their story is told. And it's up to us to really think about what's going on and decide for ourselves what to believe.
Yeah, for sure. And this whole "it ends with us" thing is just one example of that. It's a wild story that makes you think about truth and power and how people try to get what they want.
Oh, that was intense. Lots to think about for sure. Thanks for diving into all this with me.
Anytime. Always interesting to unpack these Hollywood stories.
And for everyone listening, thanks for joining us on this deep dive. And until next time, stay curious.